LifeSpring Church today. If you're here in person, we're really glad that each of you are here. If you're here online, super glad that you are here also. It's an interesting time that we live in. We all know that, in the realm and the age of the coronavirus pandemic. So many of our people are online. Many folks are coming in person. And we just want to say we're really grateful for every single person. I really am. And so if I haven't met you yet, my name is Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at LifeSpring Church. And we're in the middle of a series called Who is God Exactly? Now, last week, I left everybody on a bit of a cliffhanger. Last week was week 1. And I'm going to go ahead and warn you, I'm going to leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger again this week. And the reason being is because we're building up for the end of this series in which God, I believe, has showed us very clearly who He is. But what we're going to do is we're going to take steps towards that end each week. And the reason I'm giving you a heads up is because I personally hate cliffhangers. Like, I hate watching a show, if you know what I mean. You're watching the show, and you're all into it, man, and it's all suspenseful, and then you get to the end, and what does it say? To be continued. Like, it drives me nuts. And so I wanted to give you guys a heads up so that you could be preparing yourself that I'm going to leave you on a bit of a cliff this week. But I promise you, by the end of this 4-week series, it's all going to fit together, and I believe we're going to have a beautiful, beautiful picture of who God is. Because here's the thing. Here's what I know to be true. Every person that's ever walked the planet has wondered this question. They want to know who God is. What's He like? Is He a He? Is He a she? Is He an it? Are they knowable? Did they create things? Like can I know about them? And so we want to know who is God exactly. And so I believe that this series is going to be very, very helpful for every single person watching online or here in person. Now, last week, we left, again, on a bit of a cliffhanger, but we did establish some important truths about who God is. And so let's throw that up for a second. Last week, we established that God is the personal creator and sustainer of all things who has existed forever. He is the personal creator and sustainer of all things who has existed forever. Now, we gathered this from the very first verse of the Bible. God is the word God is actually translated in English as God, but the Hebrew word behind the word in Genesis 1 was the word Elohim. Elohim. And we learned that Elohim is more of a general descriptive word of God. It actually means spiritual being, so it could describe lots of different things. But specifically, Genesis 1:1 highlighted that no, this Elohim just isn't any ordinary Elohim. This is the one Elohim, the personal creator, sustainer of all things who has existed forever. But this word Elohim, again, was more of a general descriptive word, kind of like using the word mom. When you use the word mom, it's more of a general descriptive term. It can mean lots of different things. It could be any mom, right? But if you were to narrow it down and say, my mom, Mary, then it's very specific who you're talking about, right? And so this morning what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at how God narrows it down even more to answer this question, who He is. Because what we found out is that the way that God has chosen to reveal Himself to us is what we would describe as progressively. Progressively. Now, what do we mean by that? It's kind of like looking through a set of binoculars. When you put on a set of binoculars and look through them, if you have it on the wide angle, you're going to get a big picture view of what it is you're looking at. But what do you have to do if you want to see something up close? You have to turn the dial and zoom in. So in a lot of ways, this is how God has chosen to reveal Himself to us. See, from the very beginning of time, He revealed Himself to us progressively. And over time, He has revealed Himself more and more so that we can understand Him more fully and understand His plans. And so what we want to do today is we want to turn the dial on the binoculars just a couple more notches, and we want to look more closely at who He is. It reminds me of a story I heard a few years ago of a bunch of kids in a classroom with their teacher. And one of the little girls in the classroom was sitting there drawing, and the teacher walks up, and the teacher says, well, what is it that you're drawing today, honey? And she looks up and she says, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher kind of chuckled a bit, and she said, well, that's impossible because none of us know what God looks like. The little girl looked up and she said, well, you will when I get done, right? And so there's a lot of truth, though, in this statement because all of us want to know who God is. But I would guarantee if we would all sit down and draw our picture of God, our views would probably look fairly different. And that can be frustrating because while we all want to know who God is exactly, there still are questions in our mind, right? We still wonder, is my view of God correct? And so we need some help if we're going to see who God really is. We need some help. And the reason that is, we established this last week, is that all of us are born with blinders on. We're born with film over our eyes, if you will. Sure, we can fathom, we can see that there is something, we want to know more about it, but we can't see clearly. This is a result of sin. Every person is born with a nature that is prone to sin, to be not perfect, to rebel against God. And because of that, we're born with a film over our eyes that does not allow us to see God clearly on our own. Therefore, it requires God revealing himself to us. And so this is what he's chosen to do. Because get this, God does not want us to be confused about who he is. He doesn't want us to be. So he's chosen to reveal himself to us in a real way. So last week we looked at the very first verse of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, and we discovered Elohim. Elohim, the creator and sustainer of all things. But this week, we're going to pick up in the very next chapter of chapter 2, and there's going to be a change that happens. There's going to be something that happens that reveals God more closely to us. So read along with me from the very first verse of chapter 2. We're going to put it on the screens, and you can watch online on the screen also. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast arrays, verse 1. Verse 2, by the seventh day, God, now this word God here is the word Elohim in the Hebrew, the original language. Elohim had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Look at verse 3. Then God, Elohim, blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he, Elohim, had done. So basically here we have another summary of what we've already read in chapter 1. Elohim created all things. He sustains all things. But we're left wanting to know more. We want to know, who is this Elohim? Well, look at what verse 4 tells us. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord made the heavens and the earth. But guess what? This word Lord is different than the word Elohim. This is actually the word Yahweh. So if you're reading this, right, and you were to understand that there's a language difference here, there's a different name, it would make you think, like, is the author confused? Because we just read in chapter 1, and we just read in those first few verses, that Elohim is the one who created all things. So who is this Yahweh? Is he confused? Is it someone different? Right? Is there more than one creator? No. Instead, what I believe is happening is God is zooming in the lens a little more clearly on who he is. Instead of just referring to him as Elohim, he could have continued to do that. Now he's letting us know the creator God, he is Yahweh. Now this is significant because Yahweh is different than the word Elohim. Elohim is more of a general descriptive word. Yahweh is a specific personal name. It's a specific personal name. So the one thing that God is doing here is he's saying, no, I'm not just a general God who created. I am the one God, and my name is Yahweh. So this is significant to us. He's narrowing it down to show us exactly who he is. It would be like, a lot like, again, using the illustration from earlier, going from mom to my mom, Mary. Now, this is important for us, and we're going to walk through this for the rest of the message today, why it's important that God shows us who he is specifically to us personally. But this name Yahweh, there's a lot of meaning to it. So back in that culture, in the Hebrew culture, names had meaning, a lot of meaning, okay? In our culture, we just pick names because we like the way they sound, or maybe they're from our family's history. But in the Hebrew culture, they selected certain names based on what their meaning is. Now, we're going to unpack this morning what the word Yahweh means, but it's very important to us. But the very base idea of what the word Yahweh means is this. It means he will be. He will be. Another way of saying it is the one who is and will be. All right, so we're going to unpack what that means this whole morning as we learn a little bit more about who this Yahweh is. But let me go back to an illustration that we started with last week that really is going to help us make sense of this series that we're going through. So go with me here. If you heard me last week, just be patient. We're going to develop this illustration more today than we did last week. Okay. So picture yourselves in this room. Now picture yourselves always having lived in this room. Okay? Picture there being no doors, no windows, no way in or out. The only place that you've ever seen in your life is this room, is all you know. Okay, put yourself in that scenario just for a moment. Now picture one day that one of you says, I wonder if there's something outside of this room. Now remember, if you've never been outside of this room, you don't know if there's anything outside of this room. Now, let's say that day that you went and started knocking on the wall, and you had a guess on whether there was something outside of this room or not. And then say another one of you goes and maybe lays on the floor and listens to the floor, and you speculate, no, I don't believe there's anything outside of this room. And then let's say another one of you grabs a ladder and climbs up and maybe knocks on the ceiling and listens, and maybe you speculate, well, I think there is something outside of this room, and everyone has their guesses right, but is there really any way of knowing who is right? No, not really, not in that scenario, because none of us have been outside of the room, right? Now, last week we said, what if someone were to cut a hole in the ceiling, right? And what if they were to drop a painting in? That changes the game up, doesn't it? Because now we know for sure there's something outside of the room because they just cut a hole in the ceiling. But not only that, but last week we explored this painting that was dropped in. Because now that we have a painting, we can learn a lot about what's out there. But let's change it up this week. This week, God has already dropped in the painting. What if this week, what if God drops in a letter to us? What if He drops a letter? What's the difference between a letter and a painting? Yes, words. It's very personal, right? It's very revealing. And what if in that painting He begins to tell us things about Himself like this? Yes, I created you, but I also love you. And I want to know you. And I want to have a relationship with you. But then at the very bottom of that letter, He signs Yahweh. Like, this is a game changer, isn't it? Because no longer do we have to speculate on whether something's outside of the room or not. Because now we know, and now we have a letter letting us know that the one who's out there loves us, cares for us, and He wants to have a relationship with us. This changes the game up. You see, because many of us, we view the world in a lot of ways like this room that I'm describing. We think that there's no way of knowing if there's anything really outside of the room or outside of the world. And so therefore, we put all religions on the same playing field and we say they're all essentially teaching the same thing. But what God is telling us when He cuts the hole in the ceiling is He's saying, no, they're not all the same. I am the one true God. And when He drops the letter into the room, guess what He's saying? And I want to know you. That's what's significant about this name Yahweh, is He's saying, I want to know you. I want to have a relationship with you. So why would God go through the trouble of showing us that He is Yahweh and not just Elohim? Fair question, right? Because if you were to keep reading in the Old Testament of the Bible, which is the first half of it before Jesus, what you're going to see is this term Elohim is continuously used, that we talked about last week, but it's not used near as often as the word Yahweh. And when the word Elohim is used, it's actually used usually in conjunction with another word, and it's used specifically to describe certain aspects of who God is. But this word Yahweh is used much more frequently. And in fact, a lot of times it's combined with other words, and you see a beautiful picture of who God is. So why would God take the time to reveal to us that He is Yahweh, His personal name, Yahweh? All right? It has a lot to do with why God has made us, okay? So God has made people unique. He's made people very different than any of the rest of His creation. He says that He created people in His image. Now, why is that significant? He's not saying that He made us exactly like Him. He's not saying that He made us gods like Him. But in some way, we as humanity, we reflect God's image. Now, this is significant because When we reflect His image, He also has called us to live for Him and to worship Him. That's the chief purpose of man, is to reflect His image, to live for Him, and to worship Him. All three of these things go hand in hand. So the purpose of mankind is to fill the earth with people who live for God, who reflect Him, and who worship Him, to bring Him glory as a way of summarizing that. So this is our purpose. So again, let's think back. So why is that significant to Him showing Himself to be Yahweh? Get this. It's because He wants us to know specifically who it is that's created us, who's made us to worship Him, and who we're called to live for. From the very beginning, He said, the very first thing He said is, you shall have no other gods except me. Right? Very first commandment in His list of commandments. You shall have no other gods except me. He wants us to know, I am the one and only true God. There is none like me. There's none like me. So who is this Yahweh then? Let's look at another passage this morning that I believe is going to more fully unpack who is Yahweh. This is from Exodus chapter 3, which is the next book of the Bible. It's written a few hundred years after what we just read was. And the main character of this story is a guy named Moses, okay? Moses. So we're going to read a few verses here. It might seem a little wacky. Just follow along. It'll all come together in just a moment. Starting with verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness. And he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. Okay, in case you're wondering, this would have been a little weird for him too. Okay, he was probably walking along with his staff, probably had a few goats, probably had the boys with him, whatever, and all of a sudden you see a bush burning. Like in the middle of nowhere, just a bush burning. It probably was very odd to him, so what does he do? He does what most men do. If you see something strange, what do? You check it out, right? You got to figure out what's going on. So he starts to look into this bush, and as he's looking at this bush, and as he's trying to figure this thing out, then verse 4 happens. It gets even more strange. Verse 4, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here am I. So now we have a talking bush and Moses talking back to the bush, okay? But very clearly here, though, it can seem a bit strange, but that's on purpose. God is trying to show him emphatically that this is him speaking. Who else is going to make a bush burn and not be consumed by the flame? Okay, so God wants Moses to know that this is me, in fact, talking, Yahweh. But he also wants him to know the reason I'm doing this is because I have a special plan just for you. And I need you to take care of it. So continue to read with me. Verse 5. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for this place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. In other words, there's no mistaking who I am. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. In other words, it's awesome. It was filled with the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh, you Moses, to Pharaoh, to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Look at what Moses says back. He said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Right? He was doubting, why me? Of anybody, why me? But then look what God says back, verse 12. I will be with you. This is the game changer, isn't it? I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, here's what's going to happen. You're going to worship God right here on this mountain. This is going to be the sign that I am with you. So verse 13, Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? Listen to verse 14. God said to Moses, this is what you're saying to him. I am who I am. This is what you're to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. So when we read this in the English, it can appear a bit odd. Like, think about this. If you were to give me a message to go give to the guy or the gal working at the grocery store in the grocery checkout line, and I were to go take the message to them and they were to say, hey, Mark, who sent you here to me? And I were to say, I am sent me. Like that just feels a little odd, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense in the English. But in Hebrew, this phrase that's used here for I am is jam-packed with meaning. It's jam-packed with meaning, right? So the big idea behind this phrase, I am, is, sorry, lost my notes here. I'll make sure I get the wording right. The one who is and the one who will be. This phrase, I am, is packed with the meaning, the one who is and the one who will be. So when he says that I am has sent you, he's saying the one who has forever been, the one who is now, and the one who always will be. And there's only one person who meets that description. It's Yahweh. In fact, the root word behind this word and the word Yahweh is actually the same word. And again, it carries this idea that Yahweh is the one who is and who will be. The one who has existed forever. In eternity past, God has always existed. In eternity future, God will always exist. He forever will be Yahweh. Now, this is significant for us. Guess what? In case Moses had any doubts, or in case they had any doubts, look at what verse 15 says. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. Look at this. This is my name forever. The name you shall call me from generation to generation. See, I am who I am is the same one as Yahweh. And he has existed forever. Now, what's important to know about this, guys, is since God has always existed, everything that has been created depends on him. He doesn't depend on anything. He is independent of all creation. Everything has an origin except for God. And last week we established if he had an origin, he wouldn't be God. Now, why am I spending so much time unpacking this? It's because we have to understand that this God that we're talking about, the one true God that's revealing himself to us, he has been here forever, he has always existed, and he always will exist. So therefore, there are certain things that we can deduct from that. First of all, from this name Yahweh, we realize that he wants to have a relationship with us. So the eternal God wants to have a relationship with his creation. Okay? So all throughout the Old Testament, what we see is we see this word Yahweh being used to relate to his people. Okay? It's always used in a relational sense. So this is significant because he created people specifically and uniquely to have a relationship with him. No other creation has this distinct difference about them. Humanity was created to have a relationship with God. So get this. You can write this down. This is the main thing we're going to unpack this morning. That is this. God is the one and only, eternally self-existing, unchanging, and relational God. That's a mouthful. I know. So we're going to unpack it, okay? God is the one and only, eternally self-existing, unchanging, and relational God. Okay, we deduce this from the name Yahweh and from the rest of the scriptures that we've been reading. So why does this matter? Let's unpack it one piece at a time because every aspect of who Yahweh is super important to each one of us. First of all, why does it matter that God is one? Because he tells us from the very get-go that we were made to live for his glory. His glory. No one else's glory. He does not want us to be confused. It is him that we've been designed to live for. And guess what? He's the only one that deserves our worship and our glory. If he is the only one who has existed forever, and he's the only one who will exist forever, then he is the only one who deserves our glory. Not some version of God, not some perverted version of him. The one and true God, Yahweh, deserves our worship. Not Allah, not Buddha, not any of the Eastern religions' gods, not any of the Greek gods, Yahweh. Yahweh is the one and true God that deserves our worship. Secondly, why does it matter that he's eternal and he is self-existing? Because he is not dependent on anything. He's not like us, right? We are dependent on lots of things to be alive, aren't we? But he is not like us. But get this, we try to live like we are God, don't we? And that makes the problem even worse than it has to be. Like, that's the reason that we are consumed with living comfortable lives. That's the reason that we always want to be right, because we want to pretend in a lot of ways like we are God, that we are independent. We tend to make decisions based on what's best for me, right? Our lives revolve around me. We, in a lot of ways, pretend as if we are the independent God of it all. Even though we might not say that. No one would say, I believe I'm God, unless you're kind of crazy. But we live like that, don't we? We live like that. See, what God wants us to know is that he exists independent of us, and he didn't have to create us. He didn't have to. I want you to let that sink in just for a moment. He didn't have to create us. It was a choice. And he chose to create us so that each one of us would be unique and that we would uniquely worship him and bring him glory. So guess what? When you reflect on that, we have to realize that, man, we have value to God. We have value. Because why else would he have made us? Why else would he give you life and sustain your life if you do not have value? So what else? Why does it matter that he is unchanging? That's one of our statements up here that we gather from the name Yahweh. It matters because since he is unchanging, he is also trustworthy and he's perfect. Now, if I were to ask you all to think about the top few moments in your life that you've been deeply, deeply hurt, if you were to reflect on those, and I were to ask you to describe each one of those scenarios, I would guarantee that at least one, if not all of them, were because of someone that you deeply trusted in who hurt you. Either they let you down, they manipulated you, they lied to you. This person that you placed so much trust in let you down. And the reason that hurts so bad, guys, is because every one of us, we desire to be able to trust someone fully, right? To be able to trust someone with everything and know that they will never let us down. You see, what you and I, what we crave, is we don't crave a person, because a person at the end of the day will always let us down, unfortunately, because we're all imperfect. But what we crave is we crave a perfect and trustworthy God. He's the only one that can fulfill that longing inside each one of us. So why does it matter that he's perfect? Because get this. Think about this just for a second. If God were to ever change, he's unchanging. If he were to ever change, what would that also mean? That he's not perfect. Because why would a perfect God need to change? That would imply that he is actually not perfect. You following the logic there? So if he were to change, he would not be perfect. But because he is perfect and because he's unchanging, those two things go hand in hand. You see, because he's unchanging, he is trustworthy. We can trust him. He is the one that we can trust above all. And last but not least, why does it matter that God is relational? You see, from this passage in Genesis 2 that we started with onward, Yahweh is described as being a relational God, a relational God. See, we were not just created just robots or objects. We were created in a way that we can have relationships with other people, but more importantly, relationships with the one who made us. Right? So God made us unique in this way with the personal capacity to relate to God. Now, this is the reason that we were made. It was to have a relationship with God. Now, that's been screwed up through sin, but we were created to have a relationship with God. So you guys can write this down. This is our big takeaway for the day. Is God's primary purpose behind showing you who He is so that you can have a relationship with Him. So that you can have a relationship with Him. Get this. He didn't have to create you. He didn't have to reveal who He is to you. So this question of who is God exactly, the whole reason that He's revealing Himself to us is so that we can have a relationship with Him. You can't miss that. It's written all through the threads of the Bible that He wants to have a relationship with His people. So each week that goes on, we're going to talk more about that, what that relationship looks like. But you cannot miss that He wants to have a relationship with us. Think about it like this. When someone gets married, we don't just get married for the financial benefits that come from marriage, right? I mean, some people might. It's kind of crazy. But the reason that we get married is for the relational aspect of the marriage, right? To have someone that we can share life with and do life with. In the same way that God, He just didn't choose to reveal Himself to us just for the fun of it, just so you know who God is, right? He didn't just reveal Himself to be a grand encyclopedia for knowledge, and for some of you teenagers that might not know what an encyclopedia is, He didn't just reveal to us that He is the great Google search engine that you can gain knowledge from. Does encyclopedias even still exist? I don't really know, right? So He didn't just reveal Himself to us so that we can gain more knowledge. He didn't just reveal Himself to us to be like a magic 8-ball of some sort where you can shake up and learn the future. He didn't reveal Himself just so He could be a genie in a bottle so we can ask 3 wishes of and He can grant them to us, right? He didn't reveal Himself to us just so He can be our personal bank that we can go to and ask Him to bless us with financial riches and wealth and health and all of that stuff. He revealed Himself to us so that He can have a relationship with us. So this is critical for us to see. Why else would He have revealed Himself to us? He didn't do so purposelessly. He did so purposefully. So here's what I want to challenge everyone to. Again, I'm leaving you on a bit of a cliffhanger because we learned it is relational, and each week that comes over the next couple of weeks, we're going to learn how we are to relate to God and how we can have a relationship with God. But here's what I want to challenge everyone with as a big takeaway for the day. The way that He's chosen to reveal Himself primarily to us is through His words that are contained in the Bible. And so what we've done as a church is we have focused our energy on really helping the people that are with us online, the people that are here in person, in helping you learn how to read the Bible. If you're not currently reading the Bible regularly, then I get it. I get the things that hold you back. Maybe it's hard to read, or maybe you get confused, or maybe you don't have time. There's all these things. And so what we need to know is if God has chosen to reveal Himself to us through the Bible, and He has done so that we can have a relationship with Him, there's nothing else more important in this life. And so what we want to do is we want to help you get started in reading the Bible. So what we've done is we've put together a study through the book of Matthew. Okay? And what you have to do, I'm going to throw up on the screen right quick. So I want to help everybody get started reading the Bible by studying through the book of Matthew. So what we've done is we put together a plan that you can text in the word read to that phone number right there. You can take your phones out. Don't feel weird to do it. If you text the word read to that phone number, you can correspond with it, and you can actually start a Bible reading plan with us reading through the book of Matthew. And so what will happen is you'll have to text back and forth a couple of times, but then starting tomorrow, you'll start getting an email every day of the week with a portion of the book of Matthew to read, and then some notes to help you understand it and how to apply it and how to pray through it to apply it to your life. And the reason that we've done this, guys, is again, because we know that God has made every one of us for a relationship with Him. And the way that happens as we learn more about Him and as we begin to understand Him more. And as we begin to understand Him more, we'll see a few things about Him. That He loves us, that He wants to know you, that He's done everything necessary in order to make a relationship possible. You'll begin to see these things as you engage with Him through the book of Matthew. So text the word read to that number there, and you'll be able to start our reading plan and journey through the book of Matthew, and I hope that's a really helpful resource. But guys, listen, above all, I want you to know that God wants to have a relationship with you today. So here's what I want to invite you guys to do. I want to invite you to stand, and we're going to sing a song to Him, and then I'm going to come up and we're going to close this out. Thank you so much for joining us today with LifeSpring Church Online. I'm Mark. I'm one of the pastors here at LifeSpring, and I'm super thrilled that you joined us today. If you found today's message helpful, by the way, take a minute, share it with a friend, invite someone to join you next week to come back as we continue to offer hope week after week with LifeSpring Church Online. Specifically, if you're new, I want to give you a big shout out and say thank you so much for joining us. We believe that God has truly made you unique, and God has made you to be a difference maker. And one of our goals at LifeSpring Church is to help you step into that reality. What does it look like for you to become the difference maker that God has wired you to be? So if there's any way that we can help you, we would love to do so. By the way, if you're not following us on Facebook, before you get off your phone or tablet today or your laptop, take a minute, follow us on Facebook. We would love to connect with you that way and let you stay in touch with what's going on through LifeSpring Church and how God's working in our community. At LifeSpring, we say this all the time, but we truly believe it, that God has called us to make a difference in our community. And we believe that the way that will happen is as we live for God, as we love all people, and as we lead others to do the same. And we gather together every week so that we can be sent back out. So at this time, LifeSpring Church, you are sent.